Okay, now we're going to continue discussing helicopters, and we're going to focus on ordnance and small arms fire against helicopters and how that's going to work. For example, I've got some units laid out here, this American Cobra and this Russian anti-aircraft vehicle, the ZSU. I've got the ordnance table located up, and you can see for the Russian vehicle, he's going to use his blue guided anti-aircraft numbers when he's firing at this American Cobra attack helicopter. Now, when you're firing ordnance weapons at helicopters, degrading terrain is still going to apply when you're firing at it. That's going to be different from firing at fixed wing aircraft. Also, you're going to apply a +2 to your hit roll if the helicopter's in flying mode, or a +1 if it's in hover mode. So this helicopter does not have a hover marker, so the ZSU would take and apply a +2 modifier if he were to fire his ordnance weapons at the Cobra. Helicopters are not going to get any defensive target modifiers for whatever terrain that they might be in. So it doesn't matter what terrain he's hovering over, the target modifier is not going to apply for the helicopter, but adjacency will count. So the ZSU would get an adjacency bonus for firing at the helicopter. Assuming that your ordnance weapon hits, you're going to resolve the attack very similar to firing ordnance weapons at armored vehicles, and that you're going to have an opposed penetration roll. You can see that the helicopter does have an armor value. This Cobra has a value of 3, so you would conduct an opposed penetration roll just like I've discussed in the previous ordnance versus armored vehicles video. Just like I discussed in that video, there is the potential to have either dud or catastrophic hits if the attacker or defender roll natural 1s and 6s. Make sure you watch that video to see how that's going to work, but it does apply when it comes to firing ordnance at helicopters. Now, if your opposed rolls, if the attacker's opposed roll is greater than the defender's opposed roll after all modifiers are accounted for, then the helicopter is going to be destroyed, and you will conduct bailout checks for crew and passengers just like normal. If the opposed roll is equal, then the helicopter is going to take a morale check. If it fails, it's going to be considered destroyed, and it's going to be removed with the passengers that it might be carrying. Now, just like fixed wing aircraft, if a helicopter is shot down and destroyed, you're going to roll 2d6 to determine the direction and the distance that it's going to travel. So let's say our Cobra here is shot down and it rolls a 1 and a 2 on its 2d6. Just like fixed wing aircraft, you're going to start from the north and count around for your direction, and that's going to be your colored die. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And your white die is going to be cut in half and rounded up, and that's going to determine your distance. So for this helicopter, it would go 1 hex to the north, and you would place a rect marker. Also, any units in that hex that were hit by the rect marker would suffer a 6 firepower attack, and any vehicles in the hex would be treated like they were open for this attack. The difference when it comes to helicopters suffering crashing like this is that if they encounter any terrain that is higher than where they're located at currently, they're going to crash into that terrain instead of continuing on whatever the distance of the white die roll said they needed to travel. And just like fixed wing aircraft, if they crash into a building or the building's located higher and they crash into it for that reason, then the building's going to become rubbled. If you go to fire small arms at a helicopter, it's going to be conducted the same way as firing small arms against an armored vehicle, with the exception that helicopters are not going to be considered buttoned or open. You can always fire small arms at helicopters, but your small arms range is going to be halved when firing at a helicopter. So if we look at our American troops located here, if they were to fire at this Hind aircraft, they would actually be able to hit it because their natural range is a 6. If we cut that in half, it reduces their range to a 3. So 1, 2, 3, they would have the range to do so.